The fog clung to the gallery windows like a shroud, muffling the distant crash of waves against the coastal cliffs. Lila turned the key in the lock, the click echoing through the empty space, a sound as hollow as her evenings had become. She lingered there, her fingers grazing the cold brass handle, her mind a stagnant pool, where memories of her husband's laugh used to ripple but now lay still, drowned in years of unanswered questions. Why bother turning on the lights? She thought the darkness a familiar companion that asked nothing of her. But then, from the shadows at the far end of the room, came a faint, insistent scratch, like nails etching secrets into wood, a whisper of life intruding on her carefully cultivated void. The gallery stretched before her like a forgotten museum of ghosts, canvases hanging in dim pools of light from sporadic spotlights that buzzed faintly overhead, casting elongated shadows that twisted like unresolved regrets. Vincent's painting dominated the central wall, a vortex of muted blues and jagged black lines, swirling into what might have been a stormy sea, or a fractured mind, its frame scarred from years of handling the colors, bleeding subtly at the edges, as if weeping. Outside, the fog thickened, pressing against the glass panes with a damp chill that seeped through cracks, carrying the salty tang of the ocean and the low moan of wind whipping the cliffs. Then a shape materialized from the haze, a lean German shepherd, its coat matted and dark as wet earth, slipping through the partially ajar back door Lila had forgotten to secure. Its paws left faint muddy imprints on the polished floor, each step deliberate, its eyes sharp amber flecks glowing in the low light fixed unblinkingly on Vincent's canvas. The dog's body tensed, muscles rippling under scarred skin, and as it approached the painting, a low, almost inaudible growl rumbled from its throat, a harbinger of unrest that made the air feel heavier, charged with an invisible storm. Lila's breath caught in her throat, a fragile thread pulling taut as she watched the dog, its claws scraping rhythmically against the canvas, not frantic, but deliberate, like a prisoner carving days into a cell wall. She should call animal control, or shoo it out into the fog where it belonged, but her feet rooted to the floor, heavy as the leaden grief she'd carried since that night 3 years ago, when her husband vanished. His map sketches scattered like unfinished promises on their kitchen table. He's gone, just gone. The thought looped in her mind, a dull echo that had long since numbed her to tears, leaving only this hollow ache that mirrored the gallery's empty halls. Her hand drifted to her pocket fingers, brushing the faded photo of him. Smiling eyes alight with adventure, and she felt a crack form in her chest. Not a sob, but a silent fracture. Her vision blurring as the dog's persistent scratch seemed to unearth something buried deep within her. A whisper of curiosity she hadn't felt in ages. She stepped closer, her shadow merging with the dog's on the wall, elongated and distorted like her own distorted life, where art once breathed life into her, but now stood as silent witnesses to her isolation. The scent of wet fur mingled with the sharp tang of oil paint, grounding her in the moment, yet her mind spiraled. What if this is nothing? What if it's everything? Her knees weakened not from fear, but from the exhaustion of holding herself together piece by fragile piece, and she leaned against a nearby pedestal, the cool marble seeping through her blouse, like a reminder that feeling anything, even this strange pull, might shatter her entirely. The dog didn't glance her way, its focus unbreakable, and in that indifference Lila saw her own reflection, a woman who had stopped looking for answers, paralyzed in the fog of loss. As the scratching paused, the dog lifted its head slightly, ears perking toward the front window, where the fog swirled like unsettled spirits. Lila followed its gaze, her pulse quickening at the faint outline of a figure passing outside, tall, cloaked in a trench coat, hesitating before moving on the street lamp, casting a halo that flickered like a faulty memory. The dog let out a low whine, not of fear but of recognition, its amber eyes flicking to Lila for the first time, a gaze that held depths of unspoken stories, promising that this intrusion was no accident. "Who are you?" She wondered silently, her fingers tightening on the photo in her pocket, sensing that the dog's fixation on the painting was a thread leading somewhere dark and revealing. Outside, the figure's footsteps faded into the night, but the air in the gallery thickened, charged with the weight of impending discovery. The fog outside the gallery windows blurred into a veil, much like the haze that had settled over Lila's life since that fateful evening 3 years ago. She could still see it in flashes vivid as brushstrokes on a canvas her husband Elias bent over his drafting table in their sunlit studio, his fingers tracing lines on maps that promised adventures along the rugged coast. "This one leads to hidden coves," he'd say, his voice warm like the afternoon light filtering through the curtains, his eyes sparkling with the thrill of discovery as he pulled her close, their laughter mingling with the scent of fresh ink and sea salt carried in on the breeze. They had built the gallery together, a sanctuary where art and exploration intertwined, where his cartographic sketches hung beside her curated pieces, each frame a testament to their shared dreams. But then came the expedition. A stormy night when Elias set out to chart an unmapped cliffside, his backpack slung over his shoulder, a quick kiss on her forehead as he whispered, "Back before dawn." He never returned. The search parties combed the beaches, their flashlights cutting through the mist like desperate pleas, but all they found were fragments, a torn map fluttering in the wind, his compass washed ashore like a discarded relic. Lila had waited by the window for days, her heart a tightening knot until the waiting turned to numbness, a cold fog seeping into her bones. If only I'd gone with him, she thought now, the regret a shadow that followed her through the empty halls, turning vibrant colors dull. Dawn filtered through the gallery's fogged panes like a reluctant confession, casting pale shadows that danced mockingly across the hardwood floors. Lila moved through her routine with mechanical precision, a ghost in her own domain, dusting frames with a soft cloth that whispered against the wood, avoiding her reflection in the polished glass, where her eyes, once bright with passion, now stared back hollow-rimmed with the exhaustion of sleepless nights. The air hung heavy with the scent of linseed oil and damp earth from last night's rain, a reminder of the world outside that she kept at bay with locked doors and drawn blinds. Another day, she thought, the words echoing in her mind like a faded echo as she arranged catalogs on the desk, her fingers lingering on the edges as if searching for something lost. Evenings blurred into rituals of isolation, scrolling through digital archives of Elias's case files under the dim glow of her laptop, the blue light etching lines of futility on her face. Each unsolved lead, a fresh wound she prodded but never healed. She avoided mirrors, meals reduced to absent sips of tea that grew cold, untouched, her life, a carefully constructed fortress against the tide of grief. Rune's coat, once sleek and commanding, now hung in ragged patches over a frame etched with the scars of neglect, each rib a faint ridge beneath the skin, like the eroded lines of an ancient map. His notched ear, torn in a jagged crescent, twitched at phantom sounds, a remnant of nights spent chained in Vincent's cluttered studio, where the air reeked of turpentine and unspoken rage. Flashbacks flickered in Rune's mind like shadowed canvases. Vincent the painter had found him as a pup, wandering the cliffs, his amber eyes reflecting the storm-tossed sea, and for a time they were inseparable, Rune trotting beside him on coastal walks, his paws sinking into wet sand as Vincent sketched furious lines inspired by the waves. "You're my muse, boy," Vincent would mutter, his hand rough but steady on Rune's head, the dog's loyalty a silent vow, forged in those shared solitudes. But betrayal came swift as a breaking tide during that ill-fated expedition 3 years ago, when Vincent and Elias, Lila's husband, ventured to the cliffs with maps and secrets, burying a safe filled with documents that could unravel lives. Rune had sensed the tension, his growls low as arguments escalated. But when the storm hit and Elias vanished, Vincent panicked, shoving Rune away with a boot to the ribs, abandoning him in the fog-shrouded night. "Get lost, much, you saw too much." Vincent hissed, his eyes wild, leaving Rune to fend against hunger, and the elements his trust shattered like glass underfoot. Survival became instinct, scavenging scraps from beachside bins, dodging rocks thrown by wary fishermen, his body growing lean and vigilant scars accumulating like layers of paint over a hidden sketch. In the gallery's hushed twilight, Lila and Rune existed as twin silhouettes against the fogged windows, their emptiness reflecting like distorted images in a warped mirror, her grief a silent void, his betrayal a guarded hollow. She moved with deliberate slowness, her hands tracing the edges of frames as if seeking anchors in a drifting sea, while Rune lay curled in the corner, his amber eyes tracking her with a vigilance born of shattered trust, each breath a measured pause echoing her own suppressed sighs. Their wounds intertwined invisibly. Lila's loss of Elias had stripped her world of color, leaving her routines as faded as old pigments, just as Rune's abandonment by Vincent had dulled his once vibrant spirit, his coat a muted palette of grays and blacks against the gallery's stark whites. A subtle dance began in the quiet hours, Lila placing a bowl of water near but not too close, Rune sniffing the air without approaching their mutual hesitation, a bridge built on shared solitude. "He's like me," Lila thought, catching the dog's flinch when a car horn blared outside, mirroring her own startle at sudden noises that evoked memories of search sirens wailing in the night. Rune in turn sensed her pain in the way she paused before Vincent's painting, her fingers hovering as his paws had scratched, both drawn to its hidden depths like moths to a veiled flame. Their recognition unfolded in nonverbal whispers, a glance held too long, a body shifting slightly closer, the air between them thickening with unspoken empathy. As night deepened, the fog outside pressed in like forgotten regrets, but inside their paralleled arcs hinted at convergence. Two souls adrift their emptiness, a canvas awaiting the first tentative stroke of connection where healing might emerge not from words, but from the quiet acknowledgement that brokenness, when mirrored, could begin to mend. The storm rolled in with a vengeance, the wind howling like a chorus of lost voices rattling the gallery's windows until they shuddered in their frames. Rain lashed the glass, blurring the world outside into a gray smear. But inside, Rune's claws tore at Vincent's painting with a frantic rhythm, smearing streaks of blue paint across the canvas like blood from an old wound. Lila's heart lurched as she knelt beside the dog, her flashlight beam catching the glint of hidden lines beneath the smeared pigment, faint angular shapes that whispered of a map, a secret buried in the storm of blues and blacks. Rune's eyes, wild with purpose, locked onto hers, a silent urgency that drowned out the gale outside. And in that moment, the gallery felt like a ship adrift, the painting its uncharted course. Then a sharp rap at the door. Vincent's silhouette loomed through the fogged glass, his voice muffled, but sharp, demanding she ignore the dog, his words slicing through the rain like a warning shot. The air thickened with tension, Rune's low growl vibrating through the floor, and Lila's fingers trembled as she traced the map's lines, realizing this was no accident. The dog's desperation was a beacon pulling her toward a truth she wasn't sure she could face. Lila stood frozen, her hand hovering over the smeared canvas, the map's faint lines burning into her vision like a dare. This is madness. Her mind screamed the voice of logic, urging her to send Vincent in to crate the dog, to lock away this reckless pull toward a mystery that could unravel her fragile world. Her grief for Elias had been a cold, safe cocoon. Caring again meant risking the pain of another loss, another unanswered question. She glanced at Rune, its body-taut ears pinned back as Vincent's knocks grew insistent, his shadow pacing outside like a predator circling prey. But then Rune's gaze met hers, amber eyes steady, despite the storm's chaos, a quiet plea that pierced her defenses, whispering of shared wounds of truths buried deeper than her fear. What if this is all I have left of him? The thought cracked her resolve, empathy flooding in where logic faltered, and as Vincent's voice called her name sharp and commanding, Lila's hand steadied her choice, teetering on the edge of a decision that felt as irreversible as stepping into the fog itself. Lila's hand shot to the door lock, twisting it shut with a decisive click that drowned out Vincent's pounding fists, the rain's roar amplifying the finality of her choice. She turned to Rune, her knees hitting the cold floor as she whispered, "You're safe now," though the words felt more like a vow to herself, a bridge across the chasm of her hesitation. The dog paused, its scratching body, rigid amber eyes flickering between her and the canvas, as if weighing the sincerity in her trembling voice. Outside, Vincent's shouts blurred into the storm. "Lila, don't be foolish," but she ignored them, grabbing a nearby blanket from the storage closet, its fabric rough and musty, and tossing it toward Rune in a haphazard arc. The blanket landed askew, a makeshift island in the gallery's sea of hardwood, and Rune sniffed it warily, its tail giving the faintest twitch. Lila's breath came in ragged bursts, her mind racing with the map's implications, lines pointing to cliffs where Elias had vanished, but she pushed it aside, focusing on the dog, her hands extended, palms up, empty and open like an unfinished sketch. Rune stepped onto the blanket, circling once before settling its growl, fading into a sigh that mirrored her own release of tension. Vincent's footsteps retreated into the fog, defeated for now, and in that messy, impulsive moment, Lila felt the weight shift, not a clean rescue, but a raw commitment, the first stroke on a blank canvas where trust might someday bloom. With Vincent's shadow gone, swallowed by the storm's veil, Lila knelt beside the blanket, her fingers inches from Rune's fur, the air between them humming with tentative possibility. She reached into her bag for a water bottle, pouring some into a shallow dish scavenged from the break room, the liquid rippling like the ocean's uneasy surface outside. Rune watched, unblinking, its notched ear flicking at the sound, a remnant of past betrayals that made Lila's heart clench. He's been through hell just like me. She thought her own scars from Elias's disappearance, throbbing in sympathy. Slowly she pushed the dish closer, not forcing but offering the gesture a quiet olive branch in the gallery's dim light. Rune leaned forward, lapping at the water with cautious tongue flicks, each sip a small surrender, its eyes never leaving hers, amber depths reflecting the spotlight's glow like hidden embers. Lila sat back, giving space, her back against the wall where Vincent's painting loomed, its smeared lines now revealing more of the map, a jagged path to a cliffside marker, a secret Elias might have known. "We'll figure this out." She murmured the words, a promise woven into the silence, as Rune finished drinking and lay its head down, body relaxing fractionally, the tension easing like fog lifting at dawn. In that fragile exchange, a bond took root, not bold, but real. Lila's care a balm for Rune's wounds, the dog's presence a spark for her dormant hope, their mutual vulnerability the first thread in a tapestry of healing yet to unfold. As the storm raged on, the gallery felt less like a tomb and more like a sanctuary where secrets and souls could begin to mend. The gallery's air hung heavy with the scent of rain-soaked wood and fading turpentine, the morning light slicing through the fogged windows like a hesitant blade illuminating Rune's silhouette in the corner. The German shepherd lay on the blanket Lila had given its body, coiled tight muscles taut beneath its scarred coat, as if ready to bolt at the slightest provocation. Its amber eyes tracked Lila's every move, her cautious steps as she rearranged frames, her fingers brushing the edges of Vincent's painting where the smeared map lines seemed to pulse with secrets. "Don't come closer." Rune's gaze seemed to warn, a low growl rumbling when Lila's shadow fell too near the sound, a jagged echo of its mistrust honed by Vincent's betrayal on that storm-swept cliff. Lila respected the distance, her own heart a guarded fortress moving with deliberate slowness as she sketched the painting's hidden coordinates on a notepad, the pencil's scratch a soft counterpoint to the ocean's distant roar. She caught herself glancing at Rune, her chest tightening at the dog's wariness, a mirror to her own reluctance to feel. Again, Elias's absence had taught her the cost of attachment. "He's just a stray," she told herself, yet her eyes lingered on the notched ear, the way it twitched at her movements, a silent dance of caution between them. The gallery felt like a no-man's land, their shared space a tentative truce, each watching the other through a veil of unspoken pain, neither daring to cross the invisible line that separated their wounded worlds. Dusk settled over the gallery like a sigh, the fading light casting long shadows that merged with the canvas's blues, making the hidden map seem to writhe. Lila sat cross-legged on the floor, a takeout container of rice and vegetables open beside her, the scent of soy mingling with the gallery's musty stillness. She tore off a small piece of chicken, hesitating before placing it on the edge of Rune's blanket, her hand retreating quickly as if burned by the gesture's vulnerability. "He won't take it." She thought, her mind flickering to nights spent eating alone, the silence louder than any conversation she'd once shared with Elias. Rune's nose twitched, catching the offering's scent, but the dog remained still, its eyes fixed on her with a scrutiny that felt like judgment, its scarred flank rising and falling with measured breaths. A faint scar ran along its side, a pale line barely visible under matted fur, and Lila's gaze softened her own scars, grief's invisible etchings resonating in the quiet. "You've been hurt too." She thought the realization a bridge across there divide her fingers, pausing on her notepad where the map's coordinates grew clearer, pointing to a cliffside she could almost feel under her feet. Rune shifted, sniffing the chicken without touching it, its body still wary, but its gaze less sharp, a flicker of curiosity replacing suspicion. The moment stretched fragile as a held breath, their shared pain, a silent language weaving through the gallery's dim air. Each small gesture a step towards something neither dared name yet connection, tentative and raw, like the first strokes of paint on a blank canvas. The gallery's afternoon light softened, filtering through the fog, like a reluctant memory casting a golden haze over Vincent's painting where the map's lines emerged more clearly under Lila's careful scrutiny. She reached absent-mindedly toward Rune, her fingers brushing the air near its notched ear, a gesture born of instinct rather than intent, the touch hovering like a question unspoken. Rune froze, its body tensing not in recoil, but in pause, amber eyes widening as if the contact unearthed a buried echo. Vincent's hand once steady on its head during quiet evenings in the studio, before the cliffs and the storm turned affection to abandonment. Not again. Rune's instincts whispered, yet the dog's head tilted slightly, allowing the brush of her fingertips a faint warmth seeping through its fur like sunlight piercing clouds. Lila's breath caught the gesture, triggering her own cascade of flashbacks. Elias's gentle hand on her shoulder as he pointed to a map's curve, his voice murmuring, "See the path here, it leads to wonders." The memory flooded her sharp as the scent of sea salt in the air, her eyes misting as she traced a new line on the canvas, a faint coordinate hidden in a swirl of blue pointing to a cove below the cliffs where Elias had last been seen. Evening crept into the gallery like a soft exhale, the fog outside thinning to reveal glimpses of the moonlit sea, its waves a rhythmic murmur that synced with Lila's steady breaths as she sat on the floor, a crumpled paper ball in her hand, a makeshift toy born from her notepad sketches of the map. She rolled it gently across the hardwood, the sound a light patter echoing in the quiet space, and Rune's ears perked, its amber eyes following the motion, with a curiosity that softened its guarded stance. For a moment the dog hesitated, body low, as if testing the air for traps, but then it pounced paws, skidding playfully, batting the ball back toward her with a tentative swipe that sent it spinning under a pedestal. Lila's lips curved unexpectedly, a chuckle escaping low and rusty like a door long shut creaking open, the sound surprising her as much as it did Rune, who paused, head-cocked tail giving a cautious wag. When was the last time I laughed? She wondered, the warmth blooming in her chest like the first rays of dawn, piercing the fog memories of Elias's playful grins, flickering alongside the joy, not painful, but tender now. Rune approached closer, its notched ear twitching, and Lila held out a piece of cheese from her sandwich palm flat and opened the offering, a bridge extended in the dim light. The gallery bathed in the soft amber glow of a single desk lamp, the fog outside a muted curtain that sealed them in a world of hushed revelations, where the painting's map now sprawled across Lila's notepad, like veins pulsing with hidden life. She sat on the worn rug knees, drawn up her fingers, absently tracing the coordinates, a jagged line snaking toward the cliffs, each point a whisper of Elias's lost path, stirring a quiet ache in her chest like the distant roll of thunder. Rune lay a few feet away, its body a coiled shadow, but as the hours slipped by, something shifted in the air, a subtle thaw like ice cracking under spring's first warmth. Without warning, Rune rose, paws padding silently across the floor, each step deliberate, its amber eyes fixed on Lila with an intensity that made her breath hitch. "What's happening?" She thought, her heart a fluttering bird trapped in her ribcage, frozen, as the dog closed the distance, its notched ear twitching at the faint hum of the ocean beyond the windows. Rune paused inches away, nostrils flaring to catch her scent. Lavender soap mingled with the salty tang of tears she hadn't realized she'd shed. And then, in a gesture as profound as a confession, it leaned in, pressing its broad head against her knee, the weight solid and warm fur coarse yet yielding under her tentative hand. Lila's fingers trembled as they sank into the coat, stroking gently at first, then with more assurance, feeling the steady thrum of Rune's pulse mirror her own erratic beat. "He came to me," she marveled, a sob catching in her throat, tears blurring the notepad's lines as memories flooded Elias's hand and hers during stormy nights. His touch a anchor now echoed in this unexpected surrender. The gallery's peace fractured like thin ice underfoot as dusk deepened, the fog outside thickening into an opaque shroud that muffled the ocean's murmur to a ghostly whisper. Lila pored over her notepad, the map's lines coalescing into a clear path to the cliffside cove, her fingers steady now, buoyed by Rune's warmth at her side. But then the dog stiffened its head, snapping toward the window, ears erect like sentinels sensing an unseen foe. A low growl rumbled from deep in its chest, vibrating through the floorboards, not aggressive but primal, an instinctual alarm that sent chills racing up Lila's spine. What is it, she thought, her pulse quickening as Rune rose to its paws, body-rigid amber eyes piercing the shadows that danced along the walls, cast by the flickering street lamp outside. The air grew taut, charged with subtle tension, the scent of damp earth seeping through cracks, evoking memories of that stormy night, Vincent's abandonment. The cliffs slick with rain, Elias's vanishing like a erased sketch. Rune paced a tight circle, its notched ear twitching at phantom sounds, a stillness settling over it like a predator, awaiting ambush, foreshadowing echoes of past trauma that clawed at the edges of their newfound calm. Lila's hand reached for the dog, but Rune ignored it, fixated on the door, a faint bark escaping sharp warning shattering the sanctuary's hush, hinting that the past was not buried, but stirring, ready to resurface from the fog. The gallery door rattled under a forceful knock, the sound slicing through the fragile calm like a knife through canvas, jolting Lila from her notepad where the map's cliffside path gleamed with promise. Rune's growl escalated into a snarl, lips curling back to reveal yellowed fangs, its body a taut bowstring as it positioned itself between her and the entrance, hackles raised like storm-tossed waves. Vincent's voice pierced the wood. "Lila, open up, we need to talk about that damn painting." His tone laced with a desperation that ignited Rune's protective fury, the dog's bark exploding in a thunderous cascade that echoed off the walls, shaking frames like repressed memories unearthed. Lila's heart hammered, panic flooding her veins like icy fog seeping through cracks, her mind reeling as Rune lunged toward the door, claws scraping the floor in frantic bursts, its eyes wild with recognition, the scent of Vincent carrying the ghost of abandonment, that cliffside night where boots kicked and voices shouted amid the rain's merciless lash. Flashbacks assaulted Rune in visceral waves. Vincent's hand, once a source of scraps, turning violent in the storm's chaos, shoving it away as Elias argued over the buried safe, the dog's loyalty rewarded with a boot to the ribs, cracking bone and trust alike. The door burst open with a splintering crack, Vincent's frame filling the threshold like a shadow escaping its canvas, his eyes wild under disheveled hair, rain dripping from his coat in rivulets that pooled on the floor like spilled ink. Rune's reaction was instantaneous, a primal lunge, body hurtling forward with a ferocious bark that reverberated through the gallery, amber eyes locking onto Vincent with immediate recognition, the air thickening with the scent of wet wool and unresolved guilt. "Call off your mutt!" Vincent shouted, his voice a jagged edge, but Lila stood frozen, her notepad tumbling to the ground as the map's lines blurred in her vision, the confrontation crystallizing the fragments of truth she'd pieced together. This man, Elias's expedition partner, the one who'd returned alone from the cliffs. Rune halted inches from Vincent Hackles. A bristling ridge growls low and menacing, its notched ear flat against its skull body, a living barrier shielding Lila instincts screaming of the abuser's return that night, replaying in flashes Vincent's frantic burial of the safe. Elias's protests drowned in thunder, the dog's loyalty dismissed with a shove into the fog. Vincent's face paled, his charm cracking like dried paint. Vincent's retreat echoed in the gallery like a fading storm, his footsteps dissolving into the fog outside, leaving a vacuum of silence that settled over the space like dust after a quake. Lila slid down the wall, her back against the cool plaster knees drawn to her chest as sobs racked her body. The notepad's map, a crumpled testament to the truths unearthed. Elias's fate tangled in Vincent's secrets, the safe a Pandora's box of regrets. Rune approached slowly, its body low, and tentative amber eyes softened from fury to concern. Nudging her hand with a cold nose, a gesture that bridged the chasm of their shared turmoil. "I'm sorry," Lila whispered through tears, her fingers finding purchase in the dog's fur, stroking the scarred flank as Rune leaned in its weight, a grounding force against the emotional torrent. The dog's breaths came steady, a rhythmic promise of presence, its tail thumping faintly against the floor in affirmation, closing the chapter on Vincent's intrusion with a silent vow. No more abandonment, no more isolation. Regret hung in the air like the scent of rain-soaked earth. Lila murmuring, "He hurt you too." As flashbacks of Elias's smile mingled with Rune's haunted gaze, their pain a woven thread strengthening the bond. Rune licked her cheek, salty tears mingling with its rough tongue, a quiet reaffirmation that drew her closer, her arms wrapping around its neck in a hug that sealed their alliance. The gallery's lights hummed softly, shadows retreating as physical closeness mended the rift, Rune's head resting on her shoulder, a promise of safety etched in fur and flesh, the past's trauma ebbing like tide pulling back, leaving space for mutual protection to anchor them forward. The cliffside path narrowed to a razor's edge, the fog parting just enough to reveal the sheer drop to the churning sea below, waves slamming rocks with a ferocity that mirrored the escalating dread in Lila's chest. Rune's growls deepened, a continuous rumble as its body went rigid, nose flaring at the wind, carrying a familiar scent turpentine, and regret Vincent's signature trailing them like a ghost unwilling to stay buried. "Show yourself," Lila called, her voice swallowed by the gale, but there he was emerging from the mist like a figure stepping out of his own painting coat, flapping wildly, eyes locked on the map in her hand with a desperation that turned his charm to menace. "You can't have it, Lila. The safe's contents will ruin everything." Vincent pleaded his steps, closing the distance, hands outstretched, not in peace, but in demand, the confrontation unavoidable. Now the cove's entrance mere yards away, where the X marked the spot of Elias's final secret. Rune positioned itself squarely in front. Hackles, a spiked ridge, barks sharp and unrelenting, its loyalty, a shield against the man who'd once been master, but now embodied betrayal, the dog's scars throbbing with memory of that boot's impact. The gallery welcomed them back with a hush that felt like a held breath. The fog outside lifting to reveal a pale sunset, bleeding oranges and pinks through the windows, casting long, gentle shadows across the floor. Lila moved slowly, her steps measured, as if each one tested the ground's stability after the cliffside's chaos. The safe's journal clutched loosely in her hand like a fragile relic. She sank into the worn armchair by the desk, the fabric sighing under her weight, her body aching from the trek, and the emotional storm bruises blooming on her arm, where Vincent had grabbed but deeper wounds, easing in the quiet. Rune padded beside her, its gait steady, but weary-notched ear drooping slightly, collapsing at her feet with a soft thud, its flank rising and falling in deep, even rhythms that mirrored her own slowing breaths. The air carried the faint scent of salt and earth, remnants of the cliffs clinging to their clothes and fur, a tangible echo of survival. Lila's fingers trailed absently through Rune's coat, the motion automatic, soothing as tears dried on her cheeks, leaving salty trails that caught the light like faint brushstrokes. No words passed between them. The space allowed for decompression, the gallery's familiar hum, the distant tick of a clock, the subtle creak of settling wood enveloping them in a peaceful cocoon. Vincent's painting hung askew, now its map revealed, and spent no longer a threat but a testament, the blues softened in the evening glow. Rune shifted closer, head resting on her shoe-amber eyes, half-lidded in contentment, the tension from the confrontation melting away like mist under sun. Lila exhaled long and slow, the journal unopened on her lap, allowing the moment to stretch, minimal movements underscoring their shared reprieve, a nod to the fragility of safety reclaimed. Days blurred into a gentle rhythm in the gallery, the fog giving way to clearer skies that bathed the space in steady golden light, illuminating the subtle shifts in Lila and Rune's world, like highlights on a finished canvas. Mornings began with quiet routines. Lila pouring kibble into a bowl, the clatter of grains, a soft praise